Welcome to the Vin Armani Show. It's Monday, 10 a.m., and we are broadcasting live from fabulous Las Vegas. We're broadcasting on YouTube at youtube.com/VinArmani. Also on Twitter and Periscope, at Vin Armani is my Twitter handle, and you can watch it there. Or you can check it out on Facebook, streaming live on the page of our wonderful content partner, Activist Post. So that's facebook.com/Activist Post. We have a great show for you today. Very excited about our guest, Dr. Mark Thornton, Senior Fellow at Mises Institute. We're going to talk about this really cool phenomenon, I guess you could call it, that's called the skyscraper curse. It's all about economics, it's about skyscrapers, and it's kind of spooky, but very, very fun. We're going to talk about some other economics concepts with him. I'm super excited. I've been waiting for this interview for several weeks. I think you're really going to enjoy it. We've also got some stories about automation and the laws that are coming with that are interesting as well. And more with the Trump fake news, but there's a brand new twist that I'm very excited. I want to break it down for you. It's something nobody is talking about, but I think, especially for those people who are a little bit on the conspiracy theory side, you're really going to love this episode. And to help me do all of this, as always, is my good friend, producer and co-host, Mr. Christian Reyes.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you feeling?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm good, man. I'm super excited for this show. We talked a little bit about, the concepts that we're going to go through.
Yeah, that's great stuff.
Crazy, man. This is a down the rabbit hole episode.
Definitely.
Now, one thing with this episode, I think one of the themes, it goes sort of to the reason why, you know me, I'm not a big conspiracy theory person, right? I'm not big on, at one time I was, right? And I think it's as I've had an evolution over probably the last 20 years. At one time, I was definitely convinced that there were aliens from a 12th planet who were still controlling things. And then I went I had my David Icke phase and thought it was probably reptilians and the globalists. For a little while, I was on that, you know what I mean? I'm not big on these ideas of Illuminati and Luciferians and secret cabals controlling the world. And one of the reasons that I'm not big on that is the more history I learned, going back tens of thousands of years, the more I saw that history keeps repeating.
Yeah.
Regardless of what the people in charge want to do, that there's something fundamental about human nature. And we know this. We've known this for a very long time. There's something fundamental about human nature where history repeats itself. We keep making sort of the same mistakes, if you want to call it that, over and over and over. At least we walk through the same patterns, both as people, right? Each individual person has to learn and evolve spiritually on their own. And, your children are going to make many of the same mistakes that you made, and you're making many of the same mistakes that your parents made.
Right.
It's you have to learn it with each new consciousness, right? And each time that we move into a new communal consciousness, we make the same mistakes. So for me, I'm if there really is some group of people who's controlling everything, they're doing a really shitty job. Because just like climate change, you know what I mean? And the cycles of the earth, we have cycles within ourselves. So we've got Dr. Mark Thornton. He's talking about the skyscraper curse, which is an example of history repeating itself. And
very interesting.
For years and years. And who knows how, I've got some things I want to talk with him about, because I think that the skyscraper curse may go back a lot further than even he's talking about. So super excited about that. But our main story today, where we're going to do our little dig in, because it seems like that's become a big part of the show, is doing a deep dive.
Yeah.
Right?
My favorite part.
I enjoy it too, actually. I enjoy going down the rabbit hole, and I think our audience enjoys it as well. And it's as we post these videos, the sections on Activist Post at youtube.com/Activist Post, or you can go to Vin Armani, best of the Vin Armani Show. The ones where we do the deep dives, the ones where we deconstruct, seem to be the most popular. It's something I enjoy doing, so I think we're just going to try to do at least one every single show. Well, the background on this particular one, though, is my favorite moment of the week. Play it, dude.
Michael Cohen is a very talented lawyer. He's a good lawyer in my firm. It was just reported that it wasn't this Michael Cohen they were talking about. So all night long, it's Michael Cohen. I said, I want to see your passport. He brings his passport to my office. I say, hey, wait a minute. He didn't leave the country. He wasn't out of the country. That Michael Cohen of the Trump Organization was in Prague. It turned out to be a different Michael Cohen. Sure. It's a disgrace what took place. It's a disgrace. And I think they ought to apologize to start with Michael Cohen.
Sir, since you're attacking us, can you give us a question? Mr. President-elect.
Go ahead.
Mr. President-elect, since you are attacking our news organization, can you give us a chance?
Your organization.
You are attacking our news organization. Can you give us a chance to ask a question, sir?
Go ahead.
Sir, can you state, Mr. President-elect, can you state categorically, Mr. President-elect, can you give us a question? You're attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
Can you give us a question?
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
Can you state categorically that nobody... No, Mr. President-elect, that's not appropriate.
It never gets old. I've seen that clip like 30, 40 times now. It does not get old. And yes, CNN, you are fake news. It's one of those, it's so funny. You live by the sword, you die by the sword, right? CNN was one of the main people who were talking about fake news, trying to call us in the independent media fake news, and alternative media fake news. Turns out they're fake news, but they are very effective fake news. So this week brings, after all of the fake news thing, and then the Russian hacking, and then Vladimir Putin and the whole RT thing, which we covered. Now we've got this brand new dossier that came out. We're going to go into that. But what we see, the effectiveness of their bullshit is now we've got things like this. We're a week out from the inauguration, and we've got this from the Hill talking about having a new election. Remedy for Russian meddling should be new election. So it sounds like a story lifted from the pages of a spy novel. U.S. intelligence officials have concluded that Russian dictator Vladimir Putin led a cyber espionage scheme designed to help Donald Trump win the presidential election. That's how this article starts. Then it goes on. What's even worse is that Putin's plan worked, and Trump now seems to be siding with Russia against U.S. intelligence agencies. It's hard to know how to respond to this because it is unprecedented, but it is essential to take whatever action is necessary to make this right, as difficult, complicated, and even uncomfortable as that may be. The hard reality is that the presidential election we just held was delegitimized by foreign interference. This is not some conspiracy theory or fevered fantasy. Oh, really? It is a conclusion that flows directly from the unanimous assessments of the U.S. Intelligence Committee. Okay, so we covered this. We've already covered this. We know that even those assessments were complete and utter bullshit. We covered these in the last 3 weeks. We did deep dives. We dove into the assessments. Other people have done it very, very well. James Corbett did it's about a 20-minute piece where I think he covers all three. It's excellent. Go and check that out. You can check ours out. Ours is longer and we go more in depth. But there's so many of these out there, like we know. And the people who are paying attention and the people who are consuming independent news know it. So it goes even further, though. And they're just continuing this narrative. Now, also this week, we have this weird story with Representative John Lewis. So we have this John Lewis story here. So John Lewis goes on Meet the Press, and he said that he will find it difficult to work with Trump because he doesn't see him as a legitimate president. Why? Well, because the Russians wrecked Clinton's presidential campaign, and that's just not fair or something. He also plans on skipping the inauguration, the first time he had done so since he came to Congress. And he also believes, or he said, that he believes there was a conspiracy to defeat Clinton. Now, this is going to be really interesting. I want you to think about this one. The conspiracy to defeat Clinton. So far, that is totally unproven. But there may very well have been and still is a conspiracy to defeat Trump. So this is an ironic statement. After he said this, Donald Trump did some tweets, said all talk, he's talk. John Lewis, now the guy was a former civil rights activist. That's what he's known for, but that was 50 years ago. The dude's like 87 years old now. Funny, just a little sort of funny story, and then we're going to get straight into what the meat of this week's new Russian bullshit is. This popped up on Washington Post after the Meet the Press and then the Twitter thing from Donald Trump. We have this book thing, this Washington Post book thing. This is, I don't even know what this is. It seems so weird to me. They're saying that John Lewis's books became the number 1 and number 2 best-selling books on Amazon after this Donald Trump tweet thing. This, to me, it doesn't pass the smell test. I do not believe of all the books out there that, I mean, you know how many books you have to sell to be the number 1 book on Amazon and the number 2 book on Amazon? Like, it beat out all the Harry Potter books. It beat out everything. I don't believe it. But what I do believe is Amazon is owned by the CEO of Amazon is Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. And I do believe, and as I said before, that the Washington Post, I've said it many times now, the Washington Post has been infiltrated by the CIA, and there is an intelligence operation being perpetrated against the American people. We are going to show that this is actually the case today. I believe that this is actually trying to incentivize other Congress people who have written books to talk bad about Donald Trump and to get Donald Trump talking bad about them as though, oh yeah, I'll sell a ton of books by doing it. I really think that this is a cynical attempt to do that, and I think that they may have even changed the Amazon ratings to do that. It's just my thought. It's just my thought, but that's what makes sense to me. I don't believe that everybody went out and started buying John Lewis's books. Who the fuck cares about it, John Lewis? Seriously, man, seriously. So what I do want to go to, Christian, and maybe we can just dump right into it, that this little video covers the situation with this dodgy dossier that got Donald Trump saying that CNN was fake news. Let's go ahead and play this dossier vid.
It's a long way from Washington, but this is where the explosive report on Trump and Russia began life. These the London offices of Christopher Steele. He's the man thought to be behind claims that Russian operatives collected compromising material on the US president-elect. Steele worked for Britain's MI6 intelligence service, according to people familiar with his career. After leaving, he set up London-based Orbis Business Intelligence in 2009. It's thought he was a key player in the exposure of corruption at football governing body FIFA. Later, he was reportedly hired by unidentified Republicans who wanted to stop Trump's bid for the GOP nomination. Steele judged the material so important that he also passed it to the FBI. But the Bureau's probe went nowhere. Steele cutting off contact with the feds a month before the November election, frustrated at the lack of progress. After Trump's win, the information circulated for months among major media outlets, including Reuters, but it couldn't be corroborated. This week the website BuzzFeed finally published some of Steele's material. That's drawn a furious response from the president-elect. He calls the reports phony stuff and fake news. Russian authorities also dismissing the allegations. The co-founder of Orbis told the Wall Street Journal that he could neither confirm nor deny the company produced the reports on Trump. Meanwhile, Steele is nowhere to be found, thought to be in hiding. The ending to this spy thriller yet to be written.
Okay, so here's the story. There's a 35-page report. That's what this was all about, that has some compromising things about Trump. The most scandalous thing that sort of came out in the news is some story about Trump hiring some prostitutes to pee, to urinate on a bed that Obama had previously slept in or something like that. And then there's a series of things. All of these have basically been turned out to be totally not corroborated. As Trump was referring to, there's a guy who's mentioned who's supposed to be part of the Trump organization, but it's actually another guy who has the same name, who's not associated with Trump, who is doing something, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's this kind of hit piece. Now, what's interesting in that Reuters report is that they said that this thing was compiled by Orbis because Orbis was hired by unidentified Republicans during the primary to try to get dirt on Trump to derail his primary candidacy. And then because it was so damaging or whatever, that Orbis took it to the FBI and gave it to media outlets. This turns out to not be true. The person who gave it to the FBI, it turns out, is our good friend, former POW, senator, and presidential campaign loser, Senator John McCain, also AKA Insane McCain. So this guy is actually the one who gave it to the FBI. He's the one, or him and other people, who hired this Christopher Steele and Orbis to go out and find this information. Then McCain hands it to the FBI, and presumably McCain also gave it to the media. And that's how it finds its way into this whole thing. And when McCain was confronted on this, he looked guilty as sin. Let's see this McCain video.
And I took it to the FBI and have had no further involvement with the issue. By the way, according to some media reports, they had already had that information, but I didn't know that at the time. I did what any citizen should do. I received sensitive information, and then I handed it over to the proper agency of government, and I had nothing else to do with the issue.
Why do you think they came to you?
I have no idea.
Do you find the information credible?
I don't know. That's why I gave it to the FBI. I don't know if it's credible or not, but the information I thought deserved to be delivered to the FBI, the appropriate agency of government.
Does it trouble you?
It doesn't trouble me because I don't know if it's accurate or not.
Okay.
Does it make you worried that he is subject to blackmail by either Russians or others?
It doesn't bother me because I don't know if it's true or not true, because I have no way of corroborating that. The individual gave me made sure I received the information. I then looked at it. I decided it's a matter for the FBI and gave it to the FBI.
He's not guilty at all, dude. Christian, my favorite part of that my favorite part of that is like, Senator McCain, why do you think that the people that you hired to do a dossier gave you a dossier? I don't know why they came to me. I have no idea why they gave it to me, but I just gave it to the FBI. Like, dude, seriously? Yeah. John McCain's just walking down the street and somebody's like, it's like, does he really think that it's like some sort of a weird black and white like Humphrey Bogart movie? Like there's some guy walking down like a set at Universal Studios in a trench coat and he's like, psst, psst. hey you.
Spy versus spy.
Hey you, old man. Here, this is about Trump. And then just like takes off. Spy versus spy. Well, dude, speaking of spy versus spy though, this is really getting us now. We're laughing about it, but this story has uncovered something, and this is the rabbit hole that we're going to go down. So this guy, Christopher Steele, he's a former MI6, which is like the equivalent of CIA, right? That's what James Bond is MI6, right? Former spy of British intelligence. He leaves the government. He sets up this private company, Orbis, okay? That basically then goes out, as we've seen, gets hired by somebody in our political system, right? John McCain.
Yeah.
Hires this private spy firm that goes out and does spy stuff, gathers intelligence, damaging intelligence, exactly the type of things that MI6, CIA, KGB, or I guess they're FSB now, that they all go and do. Like, this is what intelligence, Mossad. But this is a private firm that you can just go and hire if you got enough coin. Right? This guy goes and now he's supposedly in hiding. Okay? And this thing has affected the presidential election. So you've got this private spy firm. Now, when this story broke and Trump went after CNN, my prediction, my Vinstradamus prediction, was that CNN was going to double down. And they were basically going to go even harder at this thing, try to prove, no, what we did was right, like, it's okay. And sure enough, they did. And one of the stories that they put online and then started reporting about, it was an op-ed piece written by some guys who were friends of this Christopher Steele guy who run another spy firm. This one not in UK, this one in Arlington, Virginia.
Interesting.
Okay? So let's take a look at this story, because this is the beginning of our trip down the rabbit hole. It's titled Ex-Spy Who Wrote Intel Memos is a Pro by Nick Dowling and David Hanley. So it says Nick Dowling is a former director on the National Security Council staff during the Clinton administration and is president of IDS International, a government services firm with business in research, training, expeditionary services, and cybersecurity. David Hanley is a former senior British government official and expert on intelligence and national security. He is an appointed member of the Most Distinguished Order of St. Michael and St. George. Hanley was a colleague of Chris Steele's in service with the British government and has known him for more than 20 years. The opinions expressed in this commentary are those of the author. So let's see a little bit about what these guys write. So this was the article in which CNN decided, and this was their little disclaimer, that they said the former intelligence officer who compiled the memos, Chris Steele, we haven't released his name, but other news organizations are doing it, and other former intelligence officials are speaking up in his defense, as the following piece shows. Now, it's interesting that they're framing them as former intelligence officials, and we're going to see that these guys are very far from former. They're former intelligence officials, but they're not former intelligence operatives, you could say, right? So these guys basically go through, and they're trying to say that it's dangerous that Trump is sort of having a backlash against the intelligence services for doing it, for even creating all of this hubbub that has been proven to be complete bullshit, right? We've proven it. A lot of people have proven it. We've gone through it for weeks now. So this part, Trump has singled out the leaders and said that if the president does not agree with the intelligence heads will roll. That is a recipe for disaster in terms of creating distrust between the intelligence community and the Trump administration. It also risks distorting intelligence community assessments to avoid the wrath of political disfavor. All of these are the weaknesses found in unprofessional intelligence services, typically found in dictatorships, not the United States. The media and the intelligence community must not bow to the immense political pressure and threats of retribution coming from the Trump camp. The integrity and independence of both are key to protecting our democracy. So that's from Nick Dowling and David Hanley, who are both associated with this firm, IDS International. So let's see a little bit about IDS International. Here's their LinkedIn profile. So it says that their industry is international affairs. They're based in Arlington, Virginia. Founded in 2001 by David Hanley. They're privately held. Their company size is relatively small, 11 to 50 employees. And how they present themselves is we are seasoned soldiers, aid workers, diplomats, intelligence professionals, cyber warriors, technical experts, political advisors, and more, with a common understanding of how to train for and operate in conflict zones and transitional areas. So they deal in conflict zones. we'll go into a little bit more about what they specifically do, but let's look at these two guys. Here's Nick Dowling. Here's his bio. This is from the IDS International site. So he's the founder and president. Over the past 2 decades, his career has focused on stability operations and interagency coordination in both the public and private sectors. In his government service, Dowling worked to end the Balkan Wars. He was the director for European affairs at the National Security Council, where he coordinated Bosnia and Kosovo policy. So this is a guy who was involved in the Balkans. He was the director for European affairs for Bill Clinton's National Security Council. It says Mr. Dowling has also worked as a defense fellow in the Office of the Secretary of Defense, senior fellow at the National Defense University, and policy advisor for 2 presidential campaigns and a U.S. Senate campaign. And our conspiracy theory viewers right now will love this. He's a lifetime member of the Council of Foreign Relations, so a CFR lifetime member. So he's part of the elite. And we know that he worked for Clinton. Here's back during the Balkans Wars. We have this Washington Post, this is from 1999 when Clinton was going to go and bomb Serbia. You see here, Nick Dowling, former director for European Affairs for Clinton's National Security Council, said the administration is wise to keep its military and political options open because events in Yugoslavia could take unexpected turns. So he was involved in strategy in that part of the world, which was where we went to war, and some very terrible things happened both before and after, and there's still a lot of problems in that region. Then we have him still working for Clinton during her campaign. Here's a fundraiser posted on LinkedIn. Here he is. He wrote this. You see, he's the author. Do you want to support Hillary Clinton and learn more about terrorism? Come join us this Wednesday, March 16th from 6 to 8 p.m. in Arlington, Virginia for a discussion with Clinton's top counterterrorism advisors. So he's doing fundraisers. And you see the Council for Foreign Relations stuff in the background, which he is a member, and Hillary Clinton is also a member. So that's Nick Dowling. Then we have the second guy who wrote the op-ed, David Hanley. So Hanley is Managing Director Europe for Veracity Worldwide. That's what it says this is from the IDS site. I went to Veracity Worldwide and he's not listed there at all. But until August 2012, he worked for BAE Systems, the UK's largest defense and aerospace company. He tracked international defense politics for them, monitored the changing military security and threat environment, and produced world-class analysis and assessment on the global challenges facing the defense industry. So that is intelligence. He's an intelligence analyst. Before that, he worked for MI6, which I guess was ostensibly where he knew Christopher Steele from, for 27 years, postings in Lebanon, Hungary, Guatemala, and Egypt. Thereafter, he held a number of senior management positions in London. He was with MI5, director for Middle East and Africa, and main board director responsible for France, personnel, and technology issues. So that's David Hanley. And while there's not a lot about him on IDS, he does write the blog for IDS. Here's actually the most recent blog. It's about rethinking the civilian surge. This is from, it looks like there haven't been many postings as of late, because this is all the way back in 2015, December. And he's talking about the Center for American Progress and praising a report that they put out. And he mentions that the analysis in this report was done by a former IDS International staff member, Ariella Vieje. So for those who don't know, the Center for American Progress was founded and started by John Podesta, who of Pizzagate fame and the campaign manager for Hillary Clinton, longtime Clinton advisor. So they're even exchanging staff between IDS International and the Center for American Progress. They support Clinton. So obviously these guys are completely in the Clinton camp. No question about it. And they're writing for CNN to cover up CNN's boo-boo, to try to justify the approach that CNN is taking, and not surprisingly, CNN right now, their top go-to guy, Van Jones, of White Lash fame, who we played the clip from the election. Van Jones has become their new star, and he is a fellow at the Center for American Progress. So all of these people all tied into that same Clinton Democrat machine family. So let's take a look a little further at IDS, because this is an interesting firm. Before we get into that, what I want to share, because this is about history repeating, and as I was researching for this story, what came to mind was Niccolo Machiavelli's book, The Prince. Now, this is considered like there are two books, the Discourses on Livy and The Prince, but The Prince is the best known, and you probably know it because that's the book in which he asked the question, is it better for a ruler to be loved or to be feared? He's really considered the father of political science, and he was a political philosopher, and his work really still stands the test of time. And I read it many, many years ago, and I've read it several times since then. And one of the things that will stick out to you when you read the book The Prince is Machiavelli, Machiavelli is obsessed with mercenaries, mercenary armies, and in telling princes over and over, don't use mercenaries. Don't use mercenaries. And it's a passage in the book that I never really related to it, because I was like, man, who's using mercenaries? Like, that was a time way back then. That was completely, he's a man of his time. This is not something that carries through as a principle. But we have seen the rise of mercenaries. We all have heard of Blackwater and Triple Canopy and Executive Outcomes. And those companies that sort of filled roles mainly in Iraq and are still there as security contractors working to defend oil installations and whatnot. Now they're in a lot of different places in the world, including still in the Balkans and heavily in places like Africa, around in the conflict zones in Central Africa, and we'll discuss that. What Machiavelli says in The Prince about mercenaries is he says the reason you don't use mercenaries is because there's only one of two options. Either one, he's unskilled, and you're just going to waste your money, and he's going to lose you whatever battle you're trying to win. Or two, he's very skilled, in which case he has more military skill than you do. That's the reason you hired him. And so now whatever position you have is at risk, because you basically have a tiger prowling in your backyard, as it were, and you're opening the door and letting him into your house. So don't be surprised if you get eaten. Now, he was saying this, there was a background to it. Essentially what had happened was, and Christian, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. Basically, what he was writing in Renaissance Italy. Mm-hmm. At the time, you had all of these city-states. They were basically republics, relatively free, very rich. We're talking about Venice, Milan, Genoa. All of these places had become rich because of the Crusades that had taken place that basically ended right about like 1290. Right. The Crusades ended, but during the Crusades, being Italy, being close to Rome, those city-states were kept very safe, weren't attacked by any of the other European powers. Mm-hmm. They became little republics, and they were trading. And it was really merchant families. You've heard of some of them, like the Medicis, the Borgias. Mm-hmm. These were famous families that came up in the time after the Crusades. So after the Crusades, all of these guys who were former fighters, they came back into Europe. They left out of the Middle East, they came back into Europe, and they're fighters, they're looking for work. So these Italian families that have their dukedoms and whatever, their little merchant aristocracy in these city-states, when they want to fight with each other, they war with each other, they start hiring these mercenaries. And they're called condottieri. That's the name in Italian, condottieri, and it means contractor. Just the same thing that we call them now, military contractor. So they hire these guys, and over the course of time, what happens is these guys do exactly what Machiavelli said. One of the interesting things about them is, since they're fighting each other, and there's all these different companies, like this week you may be fighting somebody that next week may be an ally because you may both get hired by another guy down somewhere else. So they try not to kill each other. And in fact, there's some reports of battles where they would fight for 4 hours with all kinds of things, you know, horses going at each other and whatnot, and not a single person dies. Bloodless battles. But some of them, just like Machiavelli said, like the Sforza family, are condottieris who basically turn on the guys who've hired them and start taking over little sections. And Federico Sforza actually becomes like the Duke of Milan. And it's his son who, Ludwig, I believe was his name, Sforza, who was the patron of Leonardo da Vinci. He's actually the guy who commissioned the Last Supper. The famous Last Supper painting was the son of one of these very famous condottieris who turned, right? So a more recent example is the Zetas drug cartel.
Yeah.
We talked about this when we were working on the story yesterday. More recent example, 1999, the Gulf Cartel is a small Mexican cartel that's trying to take over more territory and do more business, and they're being outcompeted by the other cartels around, particularly the Sinaloa cartel. They go and they find this former lieutenant, special forces. He gets 30 guys who are trained in, it's called Grupo Aeromóvil, what is it? Fuerzas Especiales, which basically means like the airborne special forces. Yeah. He gets 30 guys to leave the military. They've been trained by the Israelis and the Americans. They go down and they work as mercenaries for the Gulf Cartel. Within like 5 years, these guys have taken over the Gulf Cartel, the Zetas. Wow. Now they're the most powerful and most ruthless of all. They're really the ones that sparked off this most recent terrible cartel situation. They control 11 states in Mexico. And they are absolutely ruthless. And they have training bases where they train in special forces. They're former special forces guys. So you brought in those mercenaries, and those mercenaries turned on you. Exactly what Machiavelli, writing in like 1500, said. So mercenaries are dangerous, right? And it's one thing to be sending mercenaries over into some other place. But let's look at this new type of mercenary that IDS and this Orbis company, now these guys are bubbling up. I hadn't really even known that they existed before. But with that in mind, with Machiavelli's admonishment in mind, let's go and look at the clients of IDS. Who do they work with? It says, below is a select list of companies, institutions, and groups we are proud to work for, or work with, I should say. Now, I don't see any companies in there, but what I see is a whole bunch of U.S. agencies. Everything from the Marine Air Ground Task Force to the Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center to the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, Special Operations Command of the Pacific, USAID, U.S. Agency for U.S. Agency for International Development. I think that is USAID, but it says it down there again. So Afghanistan. So all of these, they're working for the military. And what do they do? So what do these guys do? What do the Orbises and the IDSs of the world do? Let's look at their services here. So this is what they say they do. This is from the IDS website, idsinternational.com. You can go check it out. So they do training. It said they've been the U.S. military's leading training partner in interagency and whole-of-government approaches to disaster response, humanitarian assistance, stability operations, and reconstruction. So they have trainers who train the State Department, USAID. They train the CIA. U.S. military, UN, non-government. So these are the guys who train the CIA. Right? So they're more qualified than the CIA in things that the CIA needs to do. Expeditionary services. Okay, now what does expeditionary services? Former Marines will know that the biggest section of the Marines is called the Marine Expeditionary Force. Expeditionary services, expeditionary forces is sending troops basically somewhere far away, and they sort of operate, they're able to operate self-contained to fight wars. So basically they are mercs. They do expeditionary services. Research is another thing that they say. So they have a social science division, and it provides the U.S. government with richer, more informed, and up-to-date pictures of populations and areas of operation around the world, from on-the-ground data collection in austere environments to comprehensive big data analytics. Our teams of monitoring and evaluation specialists enable decision makers to remain adaptive in complex operational environments. So you've got the intelligence side of it, and then cyber and social media. So they're doing cyber warfare, and their social media component I found interesting. So basically what you have here is you have a little mini private CIA for hire. And the military wing part of this is actually pretty interesting. If you go to like the expeditionary, where they explain their expeditionary services. So this is super interesting, where they talk about, through their expeditionary services program, IDS International can rapidly deploy within 96 hours individuals or a customized multidisciplinary team of vetted subject matter experts, they call their employees, to support mission objectives. Our teams can embed with or in advance of deployable units with small footprints and minimal requirements for life support. IDS International subject matter experts are experts in austere environments. Special forces, guys. They're talking, this is a private special forces team led by this guy, Olin Saunders. This dude's absolute badass. If you're wondering who the types of people that these private firms, how serious these guys are. 25-year combat veteran, airborne, aviation, JSOC. So this guy's special forces. He did all these things in the military. Then as a civilian, he led highly successful training projects in Macedonia and Democratic Republic of Congo. So what were the things that the civilian contractors did in Macedonia and Democratic and in Congo? So we've got Macedonia here, MPRI, Military Professional Resources, Inc. So as part of the U.S. military aid package, they advised and equipped the Kosovo Liberation Army, trained them. So that's the type of training. And in Congo, if we go Congo here, they trained, they were working with Brown and Root, which was a subsidiary of Halliburton in Rwanda. And Military Professional Resources trained basically the Rwandan sort of paramilitary in Congo to invade Congo in 1996, and the Rwandan army. So this is what has been going on with these guys. These are the wars that no one is talking about, that the U.S. is involved in and is able to be involved in because there are private contractors. Now, this is completely legal. Christian, if you want to go back to us. This is completely legal, what they're doing. Sanctioned by the U.S. government. This has been known about. I mean, Jeremy Scahill has done a lot of work. If you want, I believe he's got a documentary about Blackwater that goes into how this whole system works. Now, like I said, it's one thing to have these mercenary forces, and this is not new.
Yeah.
Right? We're talking about, Machiavelli's talking about mercenary forces being used by republics, 500 years ago. So this is not a new concept. And in fact, they're called mercenary companies. And the terms that we actually use for our business companies come from those military companies. Those were the first companies.
Yeah.
For instance, Chief Executive Officer.
Gotcha.
Executive Officer, XO, that is a military term. The fact that it's an officer,
Yeah,
right? You have
yeah.
officers of your company. It's a military company. So we still, that's how much the military business has been a part of Western culture.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Very
But
interesting.
it's generally been fighters. You would hire these fighters to do very specific tasks, train a military, go in and do some very specific operation, guard, either buildings or personnel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the oil companies have these guys. They have security details. You have to have this. Like, this is known. But to have a self-contained where you do all the intelligence work, you can do it all. You can go in and, look at the social media setup,
Yep.
do the cyber defense, do the training. But the last part of these guys that I found super interesting and also explains and makes it come full circle to this CNN thing and why these guys are writing in CNN is this strategic communication that they say they do. This one. IDS International understands the essential link between public opinion and strategic level objectives. Assessing public perception and shaping opinion in conflict and post-conflict environments is vital to mission success. IDS International possesses deep expertise in survey research on perception, values, and behaviors of various population groups. Then we have this. We also excel at delivering an integrated and tailored approach to effectively identify and disseminate compelling messages in complex environments where nuanced communication strategies are required, whether the focus is on judicial reform, building new schools, delivering medical supplies, or training for good governance. IDS International is there to support the mission. So, Christian, that's the same sort of thing that you would hear from a PR firm.
Yep.
But this is propaganda. So, they are military-grade propagandists. They are CIA-level propagandists.
Wow.
And again, that's one thing when you're operating, to try to get some people in Afghanistan to stop blowing up, the oil guys who are coming in there or whatever. It's a whole other thing when you see that this level of intelligence operative is basically available for hire when you want to try to screw your political opponent. And that this is happening inside the borders of the US.
Gnarly.
There is a whole other intelligence apparatus out there that is not state. It's not government. Now, the government, the CIA, has all kinds of... Now, do they follow them all the time? Who knows? The NSA, do they follow them? Not really. And the military as well, right? They are prevented from doing operations, supposedly, within the territory of the U.S. These guys are not. These guys are not. And they have, obviously, as we saw, this Orbis guy got all this information on Donald Trump. They've got connections within the government. And they're former government operatives who are high level, who are well known. This is a whole other world of intelligence services that now these guys are playing. They are players now. That CNN, the fact that they're writing op-eds in CNN that are basically PR pieces, that are propaganda pieces, the fact that this company is doing that, this is a paradigm shift. This is something completely new.
Stuff.
Completely new. So this is something that we're going to keep our eye on. I would advise the McCains of the world, who now will probably never do it again after this, but I would advise the McCains of the world that you might want to be very, very, very careful. Very careful with this whole situation.
These guys are powerful.
They know a lot more than you do.
Yeah.
And it can turn on you on a dime, because just because you paid them today doesn't mean somebody else isn't going to pay them tomorrow. And it's just, I'm not mad at them. I'm not mad at these guys.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, do your thing. I'm all about the private sector. You have a certain amount of training. There's a demand for this particular business. You started a business. You're being successful. Good on you. Good on you. I don't like seeing tax money going to really, I don't like to see people taxed, period. But I don't want to see tax money going to anything, because I don't want to see people taxed. But look, if there's a demand from the private sector for you to do business intelligence or whatever, do it. You know, security details for oil people, do it. Like, it's needed. There's a demand for it, go for it. But the people in politics,
The politicians.
politicians, and I think that we're going to see companies like this, and maybe this company in particular, that these Democrats in the Clinton camp that want to get back in power, be very, very careful about empowering individuals who are much better at all of this shit than you are.
You saw it with Clinton too, because you compared Clinton and Trump, and obviously Trump was the higher skilled individual.
Well, and he even did. Jared Kushner, I advise people to look at this. Forbes did a great sort of, not expose, I mean, they did a really nice piece about how Jared Kushner, basically Trump's son-in-law, Ivanka's husband, he set up his own little mini intelligence operation with like 100 people. And they're saying that was essentially the reason why Trump won, like that he approached it like a business, did all this business intelligence, was able to target ads and target where they needed to do things, spent a little bit of money, super lean. He called it playing political moneyball, and that's really the reason why Trump won. A lot of people say it's Jared Kushner, and he's going to be he took a senior advisory position, unpaid, with the Trump administration. Wow. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, I think that we're going to see this battle of, it is going to be a battle of skill, but this infighting is really, 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 really strange. So we're almost, wow. That was a long first one. Deep dive.
Deep stuff.
Deep dive. I advise anybody to go and check it out. IDSinternational.com is the website of IDS International. Super interesting group, and we'll see if these guys keep popping up in the news. Maybe there'll be more of them. So, like when Blackwater started popping up, then it was everywhere. I'm super interested to see where this story goes. The next step, and I think that this is what we're going to be seeing, is our second story. The next propaganda that's going to be created. We've had the effect that Putin had in the Trump election, supposedly, and now there's this new meme that's being pushed out by the media, this new propaganda that all the populism that you see now, from Brexit to Trump to the Italian vote to also these. Well, just show the article. They're saying Moscow is pushing populist movements to bring real security threats to Europe, this new report says. So this is a report, the January edition of the NATO Review Online, put together by Mark Galeotti, a Russia expert at the Institute of International Relations, Prague. And so he's saying that in the EU, Moscow is encouraging a wave of populism that extends from the election of President-elect Donald Trump through Brexit and rise of nationalist politics in France and Germany to bring about real security threats in Europe. So now the populism is Putin. It's not the people. Brexit wasn't the British people. Trump wasn't the American people. Marine Le Pen, no. It's all of this is being organized by Putin. One of the most crazy stories that I've seen. And not helping it at all, you go to this Le Pen story. Here's Marine Le Pen actually goes to Trump Tower. So they're talking with each other. There's a populist movement that is sweeping the world. And this is just another cycle. It's just history repeating itself. This has happened many times in Europe. Putin wasn't around for the rise of Hitler. which was a populist wave. And there have been many, many other populist waves, be they populism from the socialist side, be they populism from the fascist side. This is something that happens in Europe when Europe gets sick of the status quo, when the people in Europe are fed up. But it's Putin. It's got to be Putin. Christian, if you want to try and go and grab Mark Thornton, Dr. Mark Thornton, you can pop back to me, bud. So this is history repeating. It's not being caused by the Illuminati. It's not being caused by Luciferians. It's not being caused by Putin. This is just how it works. This is just how the system is. It's just how human culture moves forward. We're going to talk about some of this evidence of history repeating, because economics is really the study of history repeating and a way to quantify that. And no group of people is better at that and have been better throughout history than Austrian economists. And we have one on the show today, Dr. Mark Thornton. We're going to go to break, and when we come back, very interesting interview about the skyscraper curse. So, Christian, it's that time of year again.
It's getting cold, man.
It is getting cold. It is getting cold. But you know where it's not getting cold?
Acapulco?
That's right. And you know where we're going to be in February?
Acapulco?
Yep. Last week of February, Acapulco. I'm speaking down there this year.
It's going to be
So
awesome.
I know you're looking forward to seeing me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm looking forward to broadcasting.
It's
We're going to do some interviews. Who are you interested in seeing down there?
of course, Jeff Berwick,
Well, yeah, it's his conference, obviously.
Larkin Rose,
One of my favorite anarchists.
Adam Kokesh.
Well, Adam's always fun.
Yeah, we saw him here. Lauren Southern.
Hot. also brilliant. So I'm interested in seeing her.
Luke Rukowski
Yeah, from We Are Change, of course.
and Roger Ver.
The Bitcoin Jesus.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome.
That should be awesome. Well, and don't leave out some friends of the show, like Activist Post contributor Derek Bros. He's going to be
That's
down
gonna be
there.
great, yeah.
And Backwards is going to be performing. They're
I
like the
can't
headlining
wait
act.
for that.
Very cool, anarchist, kind of rap punk. Very, very cool. I haven't seen them yet, but I'm interested. And, you can't go wrong. Acapulco, 5-star hotel, Mundo Imperial. It's going to be super amazing. Drinks, sun, I'll be by the pool for sure. It's actually rented out, the entire spot, just for Acapulco.
That's incredible.
Well, it is the biggest anarchist conference in the world. Right? So 5-star hotel, Mundo Imperial in Acapulco.
Can't go wrong.
Can't go wrong, man. And if anybody wants to join us, and I hope that they do come and join us, go and visit anarchapulco.com. And when you buy your tickets, use the coupon code Armani, just like Vin Armani. Use the coupon code Armani, and they're going to get 10% off their tickets, Christian.
Save 10%. Can't go wrong.
Welcome back to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Vin Armani. Also on Twitter and Periscope, @Vin Armani is my Twitter handle. You can check us out there. If you're on Facebook, please go and like our content partner, Activist Post. That's facebook.com/Activist Post. We are also streaming live there. So, my guest today, very, very excited about this. As many people know, I love the idea of cycles, the cycle of human culture, the cycle of human behavior, economic cycles. And so this particular guest that we have is, he's going to break down one of the coolest and weirdest cycles that I have heard about in a very, very long time. So I would like to welcome our guest for today, Dr. Mark Thornton. Mark, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Hey there.
It's great to be on your show.
Thank you, thank you. Mark Thornton is a senior fellow at the Mises Institute. He serves as the book review editor of the Quarterly Journal of Austrian Economics. His publications include The Economics of Prohibition, Tariffs, Blockades, and Inflation, The Economics of the Civil War, The Quotable Mises, the Bastiat Collection, an essay on economic theory, and the Bastiat Reader. Dr. Mark Thornton, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and I'm also having a bad hair day.
Well, not as bad as mine. Clearly. Before we start, I did want to, because it's timely, it's about to just happen. I wanted to let everybody know, and maybe you can talk a little further. You have an upcoming course at Mises that I think probably a lot of our audience is going to be interested in. It's on the economics of marijuana. I found this really, really cool. If you want to tell our audience about this before we get started.
Well, I've been excited about teaching this class for a long time, and as I prepared for it, I became even more excited because of the content that I've been able to gather. And basically, if you take the course live, you will get 3 classes. It's going to be on the economics of marijuana. We're going to look at it historically. We're going to look at it in terms of economics, and we're also going to look at it in terms of politics and the legalization movement and what's happened, what's going to happen, and all the exciting new businesses that are coming about because of this movement. So I'm really very excited about this because, marijuana is treated as something scary, it's something fringe, it's something illegal, supposedly dangerous, gets you trapped into a cycle where you go from marijuana to heroin addiction. And I've actually debated this topic at Oxford Union, and one of the opposition's members actually said that if you try marijuana, you're going to end up dead on heroin. So I'm going to make the argument during this course, starting Wednesday night, 7 Central, is that the war on marijuana is the second stupidest thing humanity has ever done. And I think once you get done with that class, you're going to agree. And I'm very excited to point out that your listeners and viewers can get a free access code to this course. It's normally $30 to, just to fund the basics here at Mises Institute, but your listeners are going to be able to see it live. And you can get the access code from your website.
Yeah, if you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook right now, you can get it. It's right there in the description, both the link to the Economics of Marijuana course, as well as, and we didn't even know about this until this morning, so thank you very much, Dr. Thornton, for this. But if you're watching, you're going to be able to check this out for free. And when you get a free course at Mises, I would definitely advise you to take advantage because you're going to learn so much. And on that note, for the people who are thinking Austrian economics, I'm not really super familiar with this, economics in general, can you just give people, I think a lot of people are aware of the basics of what we're talking about when we talk about economics. For those who aren't really familiar yet with Austrian economics, what sets Austrian economics as a school of thought apart from sort of other schools of thought of economics?
Oh, we're very, very different. It's not about math modeling, about treating humanity as some kind of mechanical monster. We do free market economics in a very traditional way. So we support the free market approach to things. We oppose crony capitalism. We oppose war. We oppose the war on drugs. We think, in terms of natural rights and property rights. And an open, free market economy that made the United States the wealthiest country in the world and is basically transforming a lot of the poverty-stricken areas around the world like China and India and Vietnam into very prosperous places. And so I think Austrian economics, we oppose the Federal Reserve, we oppose fiat money, paper money, and we love the gold standard and things of that nature. So we're completely set apart. So if you've had an economics course and you hated it, you'll love Austrian economics.
And if you are just into libertarian philosophy, this is the background for people to have. I mean, it's really been a great journey for me as I was introduced to it to learn a lot more about the foundation that underlies why, from an economic standpoint, a libertarian, a free market view, why it works. Like it's so important, I think, for people to know that just beyond the ideology, and Mises and your work there is wonderful for that. Today we're going to talk about the skyscraper curse, which Peter Kallman, Mises ambassador, who we've had on before, introduced me to. I started watching some of the presentations you've given on it and reading, and I was blown away. It's super interesting. But before, just as some background, I was hoping that you could talk to us a little bit about the importance of, because it's a cycle that we're going to talk about, the importance, particularly that Austrian economists put on economic cycles and sort of human cultural cycles. If you could give us a little bit of background about how that works.
Yeah, well, the business cycle is the grand mystery. It's the thing that, that really unravels people and makes them distrustful of free market economics, because they don't know where it's coming from. They get exuberant during the boom phase, and then they get depressed during the bust phase of the business cycle. But the business cycle has been with us for several hundred years, and it was only the Austrian economists about a century ago who really unraveled the mystery of what causes business cycles, what causes this cycle of boom and bust. And Mises himself, Ludwig von Mises, the Austrian economist, and that's where the name comes from, discovered and unraveled that mystery more than a century ago, and he was able to show that when there's expansions of money and credit and interest rates are too low to be neutral with respect to the economy, with respect to investment, spending, and savings, that's where the trouble is. That's what causes the initial boom in the economy and gets all sorts of investment projects started about the same time. And it's that unnatural, artificial stimulation of the economy which inevitably is going to result in a bust, where people lose their jobs, where the businesses go bankrupt, where homeowners are foreclosed on, and people become depressed. And so Mises was the first person really to unravel that mystery, and his student F.A. Hayek won the Nobel Prize for his further clarifications of the Austrian business cycle theory. He won the Nobel Prize for that in 1974. Now, mainstream economists have yet failed to grasp the importance and meaning of all that, but more and more normal American people realize that it's the Federal Reserve, the central bank, which controls interest rates, that causes or ignites this cycle of economic problems.
So really what we're talking about when we talk about this business cycle is we're really kind of, what Mises is talking about is he's really concerned with psychology, right? Like group psychology, that he's saying all of these things where, we sit and listen to Federal Reserve chairman sitting and talking and bringing up all of these numbers and whatnot, that really what's at the core of it is, and the Austrian economists are if I have this right, that what's at the core of it is really, it's just human psychology. It's just how human beings behave, sort of human nature, yeah?
That's very perceptive, Vin. It is a psychological cycle. The Keynesians believe that it's psychology run amok, where it just happens. And so when psychological problems just happen, they call for the government to solve the problem. Austrians have an actual economic cause of the business cycle, and that's the distortion in interest rates brought about by the Federal Reserve. Now, obviously, if interest rates are being held artificially low, and you're creating all these new investments, many of them untried, non-traditional investments, and everybody's making money, and stock prices are going up, and you've got plenty of jobs in the economy, well, everybody's going to have a psychological high at that point, and they're going to be distrustful of anybody saying, whoa, wait a minute, there's problems ahead. And so you get this exuberance during the boom, but eventually this massive number of new investments, as they are finished and come online and start selling things, well, all of a sudden your costs have gone up and your expected prices of your goods and output and services are going down, and profit projections are not being hit, and as a result, things start unraveling. And so, investments go bad, firms shut down or cut back, there's fewer jobs, there's fewer bonuses, there's fewer people, buying things in the economy, and so you reach that inevitable negative part of the cycle, and then social mass psychology turns to depression. So it really is a cycle of psychological changes, but Austrians, and Mises in particular, identified what actually causes that. It's not just mass hysteria run amok one way or the other. There's actual things that cause it. It's artificial from the government, and there's something we can do about it.
So if we've got a predictive model, and so we're talking about Mises coming up with, and Hayek and the people to follow coming up and clarifying this predictive model, we should start to see these things play out in the real world at a later time. And I think that brings us to the skyscraper curse, which I think is really, really interesting. Can you give us a little intro to what is the skyscraper curse?
Well, it's something I read in a newspaper in 1999, and it was supposed to be kind of just a funny story, but I saw the Austrian theory of the business cycle embedded in this story, and basically the skyscraper curse is this eerie, unusual correlation between the building of a new world record-setting skyscraper in terms of how high it is, and the oncoming of an economic crisis. So, how can that possibly make sense? How can you go back 100 years and see the same correlation, the same cycle, where somebody starts building a new world record-setting skyscraper, and as the building comes closer and closer to completion and opening to the public and so forth, you enter a world economic crisis.
A world economic crisis. So it's a world record-setting building, and then it sets off a world. But is it setting off the world economic crisis? How exactly is this thing working?
Well, that's a very good point and perspective on this, because it's not the building itself that causes the economic crisis. The skyscraper is a symptom, really, but a very visible symptom of what central banks are doing to the economy. And so it's not just the world record-setting skyscraper that's occurring, but the same sort of internal mechanisms that occur in a skyscraper that's of record-setting height are also happening throughout the economy. So, here in Auburn, they're building a world record-setting skyscraper in the Middle East right now, but we are also building a local record-breaking building here in Little Auburn, Alabama. So it's a pervasive effect that's affecting not just the construction industries, not just the real estate industry, but it's having systematic effect throughout the economy, and that's why it's a world economic crisis. But you're absolutely correct. The skyscraper building itself is not a cause. That would be kind of silly. And as a matter of fact, 3 mainstream economists wrote a very extensive paper trying to prove that the world record-setting skyscraper does not cause economic crises.
I think that's self-evident, right? That was self-evident that the skyscraper doesn't cause it, but that it's a symptom, right? So you said that the same processes that go into the building of a skyscraper are that they are also the processes that are happening in the greater economy. So are you saying that essentially like the skyscraper is almost a microcosm of the economic, or the construction of the skyscraper is a microcosm of the larger global economic situation? Is that, I mean, do I have that right?
Yes, you do. It's a microcosm. It's something that we can all see is very tangible, and it's global. Whereas, you know, the internal workings of how Amazon, for example, is operated is largely beyond our view. We can't really see what they're doing, but they are also being impacted by these, right now, of course, is very artificially low interest rates by the Fed. And so it makes sense in their perspective, you know, even though the wage rates are relatively low right now, they're investing zillions of dollars in all sorts of new technologies because of these low interest rates. So they're buying and integrating all sorts of new technologies that otherwise would not be profitable for Amazon. They wouldn't be using robots. They'd be using more people and physical labor. And so the artificially low interest rates very often rush technology into the marketplace. So we often use the word advanced technology. Well, in this case, it's very appropriate. It's technology that's being used in advance of when it would be economically rational to implement those new technology plans.
Interesting. I'm thinking skyscraper, and I'm thinking this example of advanced technology. I remember seeing some drawings, I guess early concept drawings of the Empire State Building, and there were Zeppelins attached to it, because I think that thing on the roof, that long spire, was supposed to be like a Zeppelin moor. And it's kind of like this, obviously it never happened, but it sounds like them trying to rush technology. Was the Empire State Building did it fall within this, was it a historical example of the skyscraper curse? Did the curse occur with that as well?
Oh, yes, it did. And actually, it occurred at the very beginning of America's Great Depression, which was, in effect, a global economic depression, one of the worst in human history. But in 1929, when the stock market was going great for everybody, they started building the Chrysler Building, and they started building what now is Trump Towers, referred to as Wall Street, 40 Wall Street, and the Empire State Building. And shortly after the stock market crash, 40 Wall Street was opened. Then the Chrysler Building was completed to a new record, and then eventually the Empire State Building hit another record. So as these buildings were going up higher and higher and higher with the stock market and these artificially low interest rates, they eventually made the records and broke the records just as the stock market was crashing and we were entering America's Great Depression, when eventually when the Empire State Building opened to the public, the unemployment rate in the United States was 25%.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's often, the Empire State Building is often referred to as the empty state building, because when it opened, there were very few tenants because so many businesses had gone out of business. And the leasing rates for the Empire State Building were far, far below what they had anticipated when all that building started.
Interesting. Is that the general timeline for the way that the skyscraper curse works? Is that there's a boom when the building starts, but by the time that they open the doors, the crash has already occurred? Or is there a little bit of a different chronology, or is it pretty stable with that?
Well, there's nothing in Austrian economics that helps us determine the timing and the magnitude of these cycles. But what we've observed is that the record-setting buildings are planned and started as the boom begins. They're, they break ground and start building during the boom, and they generally set the record around the peak of the boom. So however many livable floors are constructed to require to set a new record, that's about the time on average of the peak of the boom economy. And then the economy starts tanking as they start finishing off these buildings, and that they tend to open in an economic depression. So the Burj Khalifa Tower in the United Arab Emirates, which set the record in 2007, it only opened to the public in January of 2010. And of course, we were in the world economic crisis, and the city-state of Dubai had to be bailed out by another Arab emirate who was related to him, to the tune of billions of dollars. And so the timing on that one was match the standard formula, or the most observed formula for the skyscraper curse to be felt. And it's not an exact science here. And as I said, Austrian economics not really great in terms of the timing or the magnitude. But the skyscraper has given us a little advantage in terms of the skyscraper curse. I mean, we know.
Is there something about is there something specific about the economics of the boom period that is basically driving? I mean, is it just pure sort of hubris that these people are wanting to build these taller buildings, or is there some reason that they're being forced almost to build these buildings of a certain height with a certain amount of floor space and whatnot that's being generated by the economic situation?
Yeah, it's formulas. I mean, the construction industry, the real estate industry, they operate on the basis of formulas. And the interest rate is an important part of that formula. And when interest rates go way, way, way down, the price of land simultaneously increases, because nobody wants to part with their land when interest rates are near zero. And so as land prices increase and the economy is booming, you have to build more floors in order to justify that foundation land that you're building on. And real estate people know this. When I give talks to civic groups, I gave a talk at the Atlanta Fed about this. None of the economists there showed up to the talk. But they all agreed, and a lot of them were in the real estate business, and they've seen it over and over again. Interest rates go down, land prices go up. You have to build more floors and create more space in order to leasing space in order to make that happen. But guess what? If you build higher and higher, then all of the general requirements of those taller, larger buildings, like elevators, like water pipes, like heating and air conditioning, all of a sudden they're forced to take on a much greater load. Every foot of system, whether it's air, water, disposal, garbage, everything has to be ramped up in terms of technology. And so one of the important technical changes that happens in the economy is, as people start building world record-setting skyscrapers, all of their input suppliers have to go out and reinvent the wheel.
Right.
And so they're building new facilities as well. And so that one skyscraper is causing all sorts of technological changes in many, many different industries related to the construction and development of those ultra-tall skyscrapers. And so that's just another of the interrelated effects that happen over the cycle.
So I guess that brings us to today. If we're going to use this and examine the cycle, interest rates are low now. Even, people talking about negative interest rates. So are we seeing, I mean, I'm not in the skyscraper world, but I would expect that we should be seeing some world record skyscrapers on their way. Are any being planned or built right now, as far as you know?
Well, the last couple of years we've been going through a massive skyscraper construction boom all over the place, really. Not record-setting skyscrapers, but really ultra-tall. They're referred to as ultra-tall skyscrapers, many of them in China, in India, in the Middle East, even Russia, and smaller countries are producing their tallest skyscrapers as well. But there's a skyscraper in particular in Saudi Arabia that's being built pretty much out in the middle of the desert that's going to set a new record in the next year or so. And it's projected to be 1 kilometer tall. They wanted to build it 1 mile tall, but the engineers decided that if that would be so much weight that it would create a crack in the Earth's surface.
Oh my God!
It would sink into the planet. For example, in this building, the Kingdom Tower, you can look it up, and there's videos of it being built. It's 1 kilometer tall. It's going to set the record by about a dozen floors, and the elevator requirements were so massive that the cable, in order to carry just one elevator up, would have to be something like 20,000 pounds just for the cable. So you can imagine the power that was necessary to move just one elevator. And of course, they like to double or triple stack these elevators.
Right.
And you have to have multiple elevators because to get from the bottom to the top without stopping would take over 10 minutes. And so they need ultra-fast, ultra-light elevator space. But this European company that's in the elevator building business, they invented a new type of cable so that instead of weighing over 20,000 pounds, it weighed less than 2,000 pounds. Of course, it wouldn't be necessary to bring in that, quote, advanced technology if we weren't building these ultra-tall, record-setting skyscrapers, and in this case, out in the middle of the desert, which usually they're built in highly dense urban areas where land is very pricey.
So there's this sort of technology add-on as well. So is there a technology indicator in there also that when you've talked about this advanced technology, when we see a period, because I look around and I see a period now where it seems like, Elon Musk just landed a rocket. Yes, just had another rocket land itself on a automated barge yesterday, I believe. Is when we see this skyscraper sort of phenomenon, and then we simultaneously have this massive sort of advanced technology push. Is that technology as an add-on? You talked about it happening in places like Amazon and whatnot. When we start to see these technology booms as well, and talking about this advanced technology that really a lot of people are not even ready for and necessarily can't even use, is that an indicator as well? Would that tend to be an indicator that we're in the middle of a massive economic boom?
Well, yes, it is. And it's the skyscraper, record-setting skyscraper, that's the indicator here. Mm-hmm. But again, it's the central bank, the Federal Reserve, is having its artificially low interest rates are having a pervasive effect throughout the economy. So you should see these technological changes throughout the economy. Most of us don't see the inside workings of companies like that, though.
Right.
And so that's why this is a visible indicator, but it's something that's happening pervasively throughout the economy. It happened in the 1920s. There were all sorts of new things in the 1920s that came undone in the Great Depression. And of course, it happened in the tech bubble in the late 1990s. We had all sorts of new technological advances every day that would come out, and the tech company stock prices were, enormously high, and they would fall incredibly low after the year 2000.
So should I take it that your prediction is that because, and you said that this skyscraper, the Kingdom Tower, is set to open in like a year or something like that? So is your prediction that that the bust is on its way?
Oh yeah, and the Kingdom Tower is scheduled to open in the year 2020.
Oh, okay.
And the scheduling changes on these projects all the time. But it should set the record, I think, in 2017 or 2018, something like that. And so, yes, I'm anticipating this may not come about as a result of a crash. We can't know that with Austrian economics. But I'm certainly looking forward to lower stock prices, probably higher interest rates, lower bond prices. I would expect the stock prices in the technology stock area, the internet area, where all these advanced technologies are coming online, that they would be particularly hard hit. But when you look at some of these stocks, Amazon, even used, car part businesses, the stock prices are highly elevated throughout most of these markets.
2020 seems like an interesting, it's this very interesting year. There seem to be a lot of companies in particular, in the technology space in particular, that have all of these benchmarks that seem to be set for 2020, and a lot of them seem to be related to automation. I think Uber had said that they are planning to make their plan is to have their entire fleet, so everybody who's driving for Uber, that the entire fleet is going to be automated by 2020. I think there are a few things with Tesla and Solar City and some other companies as well that seem to be set for 2020. But with this automation in particular, it seems to be a whole new wrinkle. Are people talking about this automation situation and how it relates to Austrian economics there at Mises?
Oh yeah, I mean, we're always looking for the cutting edge thing. So, we were talking about going on radio stations and podcasts years ago when Bitcoin really wasn't much of a thing, and most people thought that it would stay at like $1 per Bitcoin.
Yeah, not now.
And not now. And but I would expect that a lot of these technological plans, several of them never to come to pass, on their projected timeline. However, I think that a lot of those plans, involving robotics and technology and, self-directed cars and so forth, eventually those will become economically rational. I mean, it's right now it's perfectly economically rational to have things like trains and large cargo ships be remotely driven.
Sure.
So it just depends. I mean, when you're talking about giant boats and giant trains, robotics and self-directed technology seems to make sense in a short period of time. But a lot of these technological plans are going to be put back on the shelf, literally, and until we get to a point where they're economically rational and feasible.
Interesting. On this skyscraper curse, I've actually been waiting all week because I wanted to bring this up to you. When I first heard you talking about the skyscraper curse, and as I said in the intro, and as people know, I'm absolutely obsessed with the idea of cycles, history repeating itself. I don't know if you've caught earlier parts of the show today, but I'm very much a student of history. I see history repeating itself, and it's so fascinating to me. When I heard you describing the skyscraper curse, I have to tell you that it actually explained something to me that I had been for many years trying to figure out. I've done some work on some things about Genesis and saying that there may have been that Moses or that tradition may have been describing some cycles, trying to describe it in mythological ways. But there's one story that always stuck out that never seemed to really fit, and that was the Tower of Babel. And the idea that there was this group of people, things seemed to be going very good, so they decided they were going to build the tallest structure that they possibly could. And in the midst of building this tallest structure, everything in their society fell apart. And that they all, they were all scattered to the winds. And I thought to myself, I wonder how long this skyscraper, obviously the business cycle has been with us for a very long time. I wonder how long this skyscraper curse maybe was something that they even thought about back in antiquity. Has anybody brought up the Tower of Babel thing to you as you've been doing this the skyscraper curse?
Well, I think it's a very interesting model for what's going on here, and you have to remember that the first towers, the first pyramids, were thought to be, creations of the gods almost. And, the early civilization, we've been around for 200,000 years. We've been civilized for about 10,000 years. And once we settle down in societies, particularly in certain areas which were rich and abundant, had water sources and so forth, they were able to do some pretty impressive things. And of course, in those early civilizations, they had most of the population was slaves, but they had they would have more or less agricultural cycles based on weather, and so you would find early civilizations that were fortunately placed and had a weather cycle that was particularly favorable in terms of producing and accumulating food. They could undertake those kind of projects. So it obviously wasn't driven by a central bank or interest rates.
Sure.
They didn't have banks. They didn't even have money for the most part. But they learned how to accumulate and store large amounts of food so that the leader, the ruler, the local god or whatever, they could direct these projects and have extra food available to sustain the construction workers. And so you did have those very early weather-driven cycles that could have very easily been put together as the story regarding the Tower of Babel.
Interesting. So there's the cycles. I'm always fascinated by the more and more that I learn about Austrian economics. I'm actually going through Mises' book Socialism right now, and it's absolutely blowing my mind. His genius. Dr. Mark Thornton, thank you for coming on. Again, everybody, please go and check out this course. I'm going to myself, the economics of marijuana. Was there anything else that you wanted to add that's going on in the near future for you?
Well, you can all follow me on Twitter at Dr. Mark Thornton. We have a great Mises.org site. We have a great Facebook site. You can like us there. You can follow us from there. We have new content every day. It's very exciting. But most of all, I just want to thank you for having me on your program finally. It's great to meet you in person and be able to, participate on the show. And we've got interesting things to come regarding cycles this year. And so I think we all need to keep aware and astute and don't fall for the psychological trap that the Fed has set for us.
Well, I will take that one to the bank. Pun intended. Dr. Mark Thornton, Senior Fellow at Mises Institute, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
See you later. So, isn't that crazy, Christian?
Wow.
Skyscrapers, man.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Isn't that wild?
That's crazy. It's very, very interesting. And the one thing I was thinking about throughout this whole show was synchronicity. Synchronicities. So one thing that I've noticed in my life, and also I've heard other places, is that lessons will continue to happen until you learn them. And this is a pattern that's obviously, I think it falls in that category, and also the synchronicities that are involved with it. So a lot of people I know, as I'm learning different things, I would see patterns when I'm learning them. So one of the most common ones would be like 11:11. What time is it?
Like number patterns.
11:11.
The synchronicity. Right.
So it's really interesting how that correlates, and I think it relates somehow. I don't know how, but I think there's something there.
Well, we are so asleep so much of the time. So you have things like the skyscraper curse, but obviously this is not the only indicator, right? When you know history and you really dig in, you start to see these patterns like you're talking about, right? But you have to be aware.
Yeah.
Your eyes have to be open. And I think that one of the things that happens when, and I get that same thing with the patterns, with the synchronicity patterns, I think what it is when you start walking through the world with your eyes open.
Yeah.
That you really do start to see patterns.
Right.
We're pattern machines,
Yep.
right? Like that's language is a pattern.
Yep.
Like everything. We've looked at nature. If you think about what the human species has done, we came into a world, this natural world that existed long before we did.
Yep.
We looked around at nature and we started to see all these patterns in nature. And over time, patterns on top of patterns, we're at a point where you and I are having a conversation and someone on the other side of the world is watching us have it.
Yeah.
And that came from out of just the patterns in nature and us putting together patterns of things that we've seen. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So that's to say that our consciousness has a lot of possibility.
Yeah.
And all we have to do is look.
Yep.
But we also have to have a background in history. We have to have a background in understanding that that history does repeat itself and that patterns actually do happen.
Yep. One thing I was thinking about as you mentioned that is a pattern interrupt. So a pattern interrupt will bring attention to that thing that the cycle is in. So if what's a good example? Just something out of the ordinary it will cause somebody to pay attention to that, to focus their attention on it. So I think that's an interesting perspective to look at as well with this type of thing is like, if there was a pattern interrupt, would it bring more attention to that thing, that the cycle, you know?
Well, I mean, could something like Donald Trump being elected, could that be a pattern interrupt?
Exactly.
It's something people are talking about, certainly at this point. Interesting.
Very interesting.
Well, I talked with him a little bit about automation. There's been some interesting news in the world of kind of robots and automation that happened this week. I think, again, this is history repeating itself. But what's weird is it's science fiction history repeating itself. So it's almost like you've got science fiction. I think we're having that with Orwell now, right? Like 1984, he wrote it in 1948. So it's been history, but it's kind of repeating itself now. This one is almost Isaac Asimov. It's story number 3.
A robot is not a human, and a robot will never be a human. A robot can show empathy, but he will never feel empathy. And this is what we have to tell people. And also in this report we say that we don't want to have this confusion between robots and humans. And so we have a charter. We propose a charter for designers, for producers, for ethical committees, that they should always look not to make people dependent, emotionally dependent. You can be dependent physically because you need a robot to do some task, but you must never think that a robot is a human and that he loves you or that he is sad together with you. He can show this. And this is, of course, one of the interesting evolutions that we will see. What will happen?
If you needed any indication of where we're going and how quickly we're going there, I keep trying to tell people this. This is on us, man. Like, this automation is here, and it's going to have a real economic impact. It's going to have a real psychological impact. We're at the point now where we're having to have decisions and talk about how are we going to treat these robots that are going to be acting as the way that humans are acting now, that are going to be doing tasks that humans are doing. Like the automated car thing, that's really, really here. I've said for months now, many months, the better part of a year publicly, that the first place we're going to see this is in cars. We just had CES here, and I think there was a paradigm-shifting little experiment that happened here in Vegas. We had the CES, which is like the big technology conference, and there's the shuttle story. I saw this. Driverless electric shuttle being tested in downtown Vegas. So if you don't know, if you've never been to Vegas, the way Vegas is basically laid out is just like, you could kind of call it 2 strips. There's the strip, the Las Vegas Strip, which is actually technically in Paradise, Nevada, and it's on Las Vegas Boulevard. It's about 3.5 miles. And then there's like a mile-long strip that's on Fremont Street in downtown. Basically 2 long strips. They tested this driverless shuttle in downtown this week. Now, here's what's crazy about this. When you think about the economic impact, this one seems like a no-brainer, Christian.
Yeah.
This one seems. Go ahead and pop us over so they can see it. This one seems like a no-brainer, right? The driverless shuttle in Vegas, going up, and you can imagine driverless shuttles going up and down the strip, right? Totally makes sense. Vegas. How many taxis do you think are here?
Oh my.
What would be your guess? I've got the number, but let's see how close you get.
I would say 7,000.
It's less. It's 3,200 taxi medallions, but that's not including Uber and Lyft drivers, right? That's not including chauffeurs, town cars, all of those things, right? They bring in those 3,200 taxi medallions, $400 million a year.
Wow.
$400 million a year industry, Clark County taxi industry. That's not including Uber or Lyft. That's got the potential to put almost every single one of them out of business. 24 hours a day, shuttles going.
Yep.
Huge.
It's crazy.
And that's just here, man. But I think this will probably be one of the first places. I had never even really thought about the shuttle, the automated shuttle, but that almost makes it almost like a subway in a way.
Right.
So
and
you get bigger automated
subway.
Oh, dude. But the clip that we showed was actually this story here. This is the person's story. So a European Parliament committee has voted in favor of a draft report that proposes granting legal status to robots, categorizing them as electronic persons. The draft report, approved by 17 votes, proposes that the most sophisticated autonomous robots could be established as having the status of electronic persons with specific rights and obligations, including that of making good any damage that they cause. And they even decided that they were going to set out some rules. And this is what I found interesting because it's straight out of Isaac Asimov's I, Robot. The story I, Robot, it's the 3 laws of robotics. They say a robot may not harm humanity or by inaction allow humanity to come to harm, which is one of the things. The second one is that it can protect its own existence under the rules if it doesn't harm any humans. So his were, a robot will not harm any humans. A robot will not harm any humans. It can defend itself. I'm forgetting what the second one is, but their laws were basically what the Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics. So we're actually reaching a point now where the laws that are discussed in science fiction are actually providing the framework for real laws.
Yeah, that's crazy. Patterns again.
And history repeating itself. And not even real history. Like iRobot's not real history.
Yeah.
Right?
It's just
but we're going, it's all about cycles. The final story that we have today is the worst of history repeating itself. This is Germany talking about actually proposing that suspected Islamic extremists could be forced to wear electronic tags without trial in Germany under radical new proposals put forward by the country's justice minister. He's talking about he called for a preventive offensive against the threat from Islamic extremism. Quote, the use of ankle tags should not be only available for convicted criminals after release from prison, but for those identified as a general threat as well, he said. Oh, Germany. Oh, Germany. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. It's like, Germany, you already done the tagging people that you've considered to be a threat. You already done the let's tag a certain ethnic or religious group that we consider to be a threat. We've done this, Germany. We've done this. Like next they're going to be like, oh, and then let's put them on trains and maybe we can send them to go live somewhere else. Like maybe something like a camp or something.
Oh my God. The
Germans, man. So history just seems to keep repeating itself. I don't know what's coming, man. I don't know what's coming exactly, but we can have a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
And so with that, I think we're coming up on towards the end of the time. So thank you.
Thank you, Vin.
And I'm going to say goodbye to the people. So history repeats itself. We're stuck in a cycle. But of course, why not? Our individual consciousness is a cycle. As children have to learn the same things that their parents learned, and they had to learn the same things that their parents learned. But how we're helped through that process is by being able to draw on the wisdom of the past. And whether that's philosophy from 500 years ago, like Machiavelli talking about don't use mercenaries, and we're definitely going to be paying attention to the story of the new sort of intelligence mercs that are out there. Or if it's the knowledge that Ludwig von Mises and the Austrian economists who followed after him in the last 100 years, if it's that knowledge about business cycles, allowing us to better understand when the next boom and bust may occur, or if it's even more recent than that and deciding that we're not going to tag certain ethnic groups in Germany. The one thing that is in common with all of those is you can understand where you're going if you know where you've been. Unfortunately, we're in a time now that is very sort of post-history. Very few people care. They think that because the technology is new, because we have the internet, because we have social media, that the basics of human nature have somehow changed. But they haven't. They haven't. We're going through the same processes that we've gone through as a species over and over and over again. So, as you look around, and as you see the things as they are, dig a little deeper. We're going to keep doing the digging, but there's even more for you to do. And if there's things that you want us to cover, please comment on our videos. We read them. Hit us up on Twitter. Hit us up on Facebook. Go subscribe and follow Activist Post on Facebook, facebook.com/activistpost. You can follow me at Vin Armani. YouTube.com/Vin Armani will have the archives of this show. If you want to listen to the podcast, you can do that on iTunes and Stitcher, vinarmani.com/iTunes or vinarmani.com/Stitcher. And we'll be here to break down next week's news. Next Monday, 10 a.m., we have an really awesome guest. We're going to get into some talk about ayahuasca, which is something that people have been begging me for. Ayahuasca, plant medicine, and other fun drug-related topics. So we will see you next week, 10 a.m. Pacific time, right here on the Vin Armani Show. Stay free.